Good morning.
Morning.
Wie geht es Ihnen?
Good. Would you say good,
Wie geht es Ihnen? Yes. Guten Morgen, wie geht es Ihnen? Ja. It's German. Ich spreche nur ein bisschen Deutsch.
That's international talk.
All right, so now that the tongues class is over, that's kind of funny, Callie. I had a Jehovah Witness. He came and doing their routine, and this was 25 years ago or whatever. And I had a little bit of Greek. I knew 3 Greek words, and he came to the door, and he was talking about John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. He said, in the Greek, that means this. And I said, well, I mean, the Greek says this. And so he was like, oh, this guy knows Greek. Now, I only had 3 bullets in my chamber, but he didn't know that. And so he dropped another Greek word on me. And so I dropped one back on him. Now I'm down to 1 bullet. And so he went to the car where his mentors were. There were like 3 or 4 of them out in this big old, humongous car. And I don't know what was said, but he got in and they drove off. I mean, what I'm imagining, they were thinking, that dude's like a Greek scholar. And I felt kind of good about it because I won, but then I was thinking, that has nothing to do with the gospel. I mean, actually, I'm supposed to evangelize this guy. But it was more like winning, and so I kind of got off track. But just note to you kids, we taught our children this, that when you walk into a place, you walk in like you own it. And if you walk in like you own it, people will leave you alone. They just think you belong there. And so you just act like you own it. I guess I shouldn't be teaching y'all how to lie and be hypocrites, should I? Huh? I didn't hear you. What's in Christ? Oh, confidence in Christ. I thought you said coffins in Christ. It's going to be a long warning. All right, so I didn't speak a lot about my ministry, our ministry last night, and I'm not going to say a lot. I just want you to know that we do have a lot of resources, and they're virtually all free. And so if you want to go on our website, I mean, there's 1,000 articles on all kinds of topics. There's over 1,200 podcasts. We have hundreds of videos. We have a YouTube channel with videos on it. And so there's a lot of resources there, and it's free. And it's all on how to apply the gospel to your life and just go. I call it our big sanctification center shoved up in cyberspace. And it's there. And so it's our big box store. And it's free to anyone. And so just go. We also have online forums. And we have people from around the world that write in and they ask questions. And we answer questions. We have a team of folks that answer questions, just helping people. For example, there's a lady somewhere in the U.S., I don't know where she lives, doesn't matter, but she wrote in and she's looking for a church, and she wanted to know the difference between Presbyterian church, PCA, OPC, etc. I mean, just questions like that. And then other people write in. We have a lot of marriage, tons of marriage questions. Where people write in. And so it's just an eclectic mix of questions, and they're free forums. And so you could just ask a question, and that's what we do. Again, we just help people. I do have some books, 3 books specifically, and they're on Amazon. And, you can get those if you wish. They're not free, but unless you can convince Amazon to give them to you. And then we have an audio series. It's called Drive By Marriage, and it is 31 15-minute lessons on marriage, which a lot of guys like. They listen to because you can drive to work and listen to a 15-minute talk on marriage. It was a conversation between me and a guy named Todd Friel. Todd Friel is a Christian dude in Atlanta, and we've done some ministry together. And so he interviewed me about these topic marriages. And so what we did is we took 250 articles off of our website, and we put them into 31 topics. And we went down to Todd's studio in Atlanta, and he's drilling me with these questions about marriage, all things marriage. And so we put it on a MP3 series, and so you can download it. And so there's audio, there are paperback books you can get, there are articles, there are podcasts, there are videos, there are online forums. And so there's just a lot of resources there. And the website address is RickThomas.net, RickThomas.net, N-E-T. And so just go. I write 3 articles a week. They're 2,000 words in length, just a little bit over 2,000 words. I put all of those articles in a podcast, and so they're so that people can listen if they want. You can listen to the article, or you can read it, or you can do both. You can print them off. There's a print feature at the bottom where you can just print them off. You can share them. I know some people they print off my articles and they put them in books in 3-ring binders, and they have them. And it's over somewhere between 250 and 300 different topics on sanctification. And so anything from marriage, family, parenting. I have a 31-day teenage devotion. I have a 31-day parent devotion. I have a 31-day marriage devotion. All of those things are free. We are currently putting them in video. We've got part of the marriage in video. Part of the teen devotions are in video. I've got 20 of those 31 completed. So again, it's just a lot of resources, and I want you to have them. I want you to know that they're there. And so it's kind of like you walk into Best Buy and you can have anything in the building. And so you can walk in our store and you can have anything in the building. And so it's there for you. Also, one other thing is that these meetings, when we do conferences, we are totally available. And so I know I have a meeting with a couple this afternoon that we're going to talk, and that's kind of normal. And so if you want to get together and talk, marriage counseling, personal issue, whatever, parenting, children, teenagers, if you want to get together, I do that. Our goal again is to serve you all, and so if that's just another way that we can serve you. My conference rule is that if I don't crawl out of town totally exhausted, it's your fault, not mine. And so it's on you to exhaust me. And if I'm not exhausted, again, that's on you, not me. But we make ourselves available, and so if you want to talk about anything, we would love to do that, either me privately or Lucia and myself, and that would be fantastic. But you let us know how we can serve you. Jesus said in 10:45 of Mark, I did not come here to be served, but to serve. And that is the heart of the gospel. And so we want to serve other people. And so our standard line is, how may we serve you? And so we want to do that. There was someone that asked about doing something on pride. Talk about pride. I'll have to get a little more detail on that, and I'll discuss it a little bit. Someone asked also about fear, how to deal with fear, and so I may do something on that as well. This morning I want to talk about parenting, and for those of you who don't have children, this is going to be great because when you have children, you're going to be amazing. You're just going to be amazing because you're going to get it all. You're going to get the full car wash this morning. And so you'll be really equipped on parenting. And so I want to, I'll see if I can get it in. It's a lot. And so let me stop talking and then switch gears. All right, so I want to give you some concepts. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into some real specifics. I do want to talk about teen boys and teen girls and the specific ways in which to parent teenagers and the critical things that a teen boy and a teen girl needs. But before I get to that, that'll be the last part, I want to get into some of these concepts so that you can have just a general idea of some good parenting principles. And so one of the ways to think about this, and I draw it out on a grid like this, and if this is 0, and I'm just going to use, as I said last night, 20 as an arbitrary number when the child leaves the home, and of course that's wiggle room, it can be earlier or later, and then in between this is the child growing up. Now, the ideal way to parent a child would look like this. And I'll explain this in a moment. Now, what you want to do, the goal as a parent, the goal of the parent is always to get rid of the children. The goal of the parent is to release the children. And what you want to do is you want to release them as men and women living in God's world under His authority. Now that's the goal. And so the child leaves the parental authority, and you want them to step out into the world as men and women under God's authority, living in His world. Now, within our family, we don't believe in teenagers. And so we don't use the language of teenagers. And again, this is just preferential. This is just our family. Our children are not teenagers. And so we only have 2 words for for people that are younger than us. One is you're a child, and 2, you're an adult. And so teenagers is a concocted category that came up in the last century. But before that, there were only 2 categories. There were children and adults. And then we concocted teenagers after World War II because then the women went into the workplace, and which is fine, women working. I don't have a problem with that, but that's not my point. But when that happened is that these kids were now left at home, and so we created this category called teenagers and gave them video games and whatever to keep them busy. And I know that's oversimplified, but we created this category called teenagers. We don't have that category in our home. Now, we will use the language of teenagers as a way of talking with the people on the outside, but within our home, I don't think of our children as teenagers. They're young adults because we treat them as adults. And the arbitrary line of being an adult is, and again, it's arbitrary, but it can be, 10 to 13. I'd say 12 to 13 years of age. It's for us, the line is when we have the talk. And I'll just call it the talk. If you haven't had the talk, then okay, that's fine. But when we have the talk, that's when you become an adult. And that's when our children all looked at us like deer in the headlights, and it's like, okay, are there any more secret handshakes? I don't want to be, can I hold on to my kid card just a little bit longer? And so there's some important things in that, and I won't get into this, but one of the things that is important, and we have found it very important, and I do highly recommend this to parents, is that it is vital that you teach your children how to cuss. Because, and we've taught all of our children how to cuss, and we found that very important, because here's the question that you have to ask yourself. If you don't teach your children how to cuss, who's going to do it? The world's going to do it. And so when you have the talk, it's very important that you teach them a theology of language. And a part of a theology of language is a theology of curse words. It's the same as the talk. If you don't have the talk with your children, who's going to do it? If you don't teach them words, who's going to do it? I framed it the way I framed it because that tends to get people's attention as it did. But we do. And we walk through. This is what this word means. And so the word, and I'm going to be PG to G here. I'm trying not to be PG-13 here, but the word burro, for example, the word donkey is also called the word ass in the King James. And of course, you can use that word in another way as well. And so it's important. And as our children were going into middle school, I wanted to make sure we were ahead of this and that we were teaching them a theology of language, of how to use language so that when they hit middle school, it was like they're not saying these words, just throwing them out there, not even knowing what they mean. And so it's things like that, because you have to get in front of this with your children. And so we don't give our children video games and just go and we'll see you at 20. They do play video games. They love Minecraft and all of that stuff, and they do all the teenage stuff. And so I'm not saying that they are sheltered and quarantined like for 10 years. But it's also important that you grow them up, because this is one thing that I have seen a zillion times, is that kids turn 20 or whatever that number is, and they don't know how to be an adult because they haven't been trained. Most parents spend their time just carpooling their kids to sports events and swim teams and all of this stuff. And in a vacuum, that stuff is not bad. I'm not saying that is wrong. But if you don't teach your children how to be adults, somebody else is going to do that. And they're going to teach them worldviews and languages that will be detrimental to them and the families in which they create. And so this idea of training children is a very intentional thing, and we as parents need to be super intentional in doing it. And so in this framework here, there are two words that kind of follow Ephesians 6, the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I use the word structure and the word support as nurture and admonition. And the way this looks on this graph here is that when the children are young, you have heavy structure, heavy authority, heavy obedience. And then as that child grows in age, you are backing off the structure. And the idea is that you back off until there's virtually no structure, because they are living under God's structure or God's authority. In the beginning, there's not a lot of teaching because they're kids with mush in their heads, and you can't teach them. They don't know. And so it's heavy in structure, light on support. But then as they grow, it's a whole lot more instruction, teaching, a lot of midnights. And when the parent is like, "Are you kidding me? Is this the time when you want to talk?" It's like, it's 11 o'clock. And you want to talk for 2 hours. It goes like that sometimes. And so it's heavy support. I'll give you some illustrations of what this looked like practically in our home. When our kids were younger, and I'm talking about 12 months and earlier, what I did is I picked like 3 things that were just absolutely non-negotiable. Touch that, you die. Kind of Old Testament like. And so those 3, I don't remember all 3. I remember 2 of them. I don't remember the third one. It escapes me. But one of them was the outlet on the floor, the electrical outlet, which is about 12 inches off the floor. And then another one was books on the lower shelf, my idols, on the lower shelf of a book case. Touch that, you die. Now, for the tape, I think this is being recorded. I'm just joking. I have dry humor. We're from the South. Humor is dry. But those were non-negotiable. And the reason now, at the end of the day, the books weren't that big of a deal. Now, the outlet was. If they put something in the outlet, obviously, that's a big deal. And then there was a third thing I don't remember. And I remember, like Hayden, the first time he got a spanking, he was like under 12 months, don't remember exactly, and he reached up to touch the outlet, and I popped him on the hand, and he looked at me like I had like 2 heads, like, what was that? And then he reached up again, and maybe he did it again, and then he stopped doing it. But what we wanted to teach them was obedience. What we were looking for were heart issues, like respect and honor. you're looking for those things. Obedience is a behavior. And you can get obedience by being a legalist and just beat the hoot out of them all the time, and they'll learn and just play whack-a-mole with them. But that's not Christianity. Because what you're looking for are heart issues. Teaching a child how to respect and honor and defer and those types of things. And so we were teaching them these categories through obedient practices. And what happened as the children get older, well, because if this doesn't happen by the time they're 2, you're in trouble. Now, another language that we don't use in our home is terrible twos. I don't like that because if it's terrible twos, it's on the parents' fault. It's the parents' problem because they don't understand the dynamics of what's happening with a child. You see, when a child is born, they can't do squat. They can't roll over. They can't do any, can't communicate, can't talk. And like some of our vacations, we would put them in drawers because we could. Just pull out a drawer with clothes in it and just baby sleeps in the drawer. He ain't going nowhere, But then shortly thereafter, we don't close the drawer. That might not have been a bad idea. But it's just a makeshift bed, And you can do that with kids, but guess what? Those kids, they'll turn over. And then after they turn over, they'll start crawling. And then before long, they're like walking upright. And what the kid is doing is the kid is learning and growing. And by the time they're 2, they are nearly omnipotent. There's nothing that they can't do. And it just keeps going like this, from can't do squat to now climbing the walls and swinging from the chandeliers when they're 2. And people call them terrible twos, but again, I just think that's unkind language. Because all the kid is doing is exploring and learning, but it's the parent's job to parent and to understand the dynamics of what's going on with the child. He's just being himself. And I don't take this analogy too literally, but when you get a dog, it's very similar. When you potty train a dog to like go outside, for example, but the dog, when he's in the house, it's like, this is my kingdom, and he can just poop where he wants to. Well, the parent needs to train the dog. You don't poop where you want to. It's like because the dog doesn't know. He's just exploring. So this is just innate. And so as the parent, you want to, not with unkind, harsh discipline. Remember Hebrews 12. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens. And so all discipline is from a heart of love. It's not harsh unkindness or because you had a bad day or you're frustrated with the child. If those are the attitudes, it's in the parent's mind, and you discipline from that hard attitude, then you're making a huge mistake, because that will come back on you, and it doesn't help the child. But then as the child grows, you're backing this off. As we've told our children 1,000 times, you can do anything you want to do. You can do anything you want to do. I mean, we want to release you into God's world. We want you to be free and just explore and just do what you want to, but it's all conditional. It's all conditional on walking in the truth and being responsible. And so as we give them more responsibility, and as they prove themselves in being responsible, we just keep letting it go. In fact, Anza, what do I want for Christmas? Yeah, what do I want for my birthday? If you ask my children what I want for Christmas or what I want for my birthday, that's what they would say. It's 3 John 4. Huh? It's 3 John 4. I have no greater joy than to know that my children are walking in truth. And they've heard that all their lives. Is that the most important thing in any relationship is truth. Just that one word. The most important thing in any relationship is truth. Our relationship with God is built on truth, trust. If one word, one syllable from God's word was to be proved to be untrue, everything would collapse. Our relationship with Him would collapse. Everything would collapse. And so we build our relationship with God on truth, faith, trust. Trust me, He says. Trust me. And so we build it on truth. God's word is truth. And we build our relationships on truth. On truth. I tell counselees this all the time. I do not care what you tell me as long as you don't lie. Because once you lie, we can't connect. We cannot talk. And I had a young 17-year-old girl came to counseling years ago, and we were talking, and we're in the South, okay? And so everybody in the South is saved, right? And so we're all Christians. And so in the South, when you do evangelism, the links in the chain of evangelism, you talk to them about Christ, you lead them to the Lord. We added another link. The link that we add is you got to get them unsaved first. And so we have to get them unsaved. And once they get unsaved, then we can lead them to the Lord, because it's like a Christian down there. And so I was talking to this 17-year-old girl, and I said, "Do you love God?" "Yeah." "Why you love God?" "Because He first loved me." "Stop it!" That's exactly what I said. Stop it. Are you serious? That is so fourth grade flannel graph. It's like, don't do that. "Do you love Jesus?" "Yeah, I love Jesus." "Why?" "Because He first loved me." Quit it. That is so dumb. Don't do that. She said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "There's no way we're going to be able to communicate. Because you just giving me, you so Christianized, it just comes out of you and you don't mean it." She said, "Do you want me to tell the truth?" "Yeah." And so I said, "Do you love God?" She said, "No." I said, "Praise God." Yeah, that's what I want to hear. We're telling the truth now. And then she told me what she thought about God, which I cannot repeat here. But I was thankful. Imagine if we had a counseling session based on, "You love Jesus?" "Yeah." "Why you love Jesus?" "Because He first loved me." And it went from there, it would go nowhere. And we would just tick the box and and she can go tell her mama, "I had a counseling session with Rick. Went good." And it's just useless. And so everything is built on truth. And so our children know that. It's like, finally, as they got older, they said, "Dad, okay, we know what you want for Christmas. You want your children to walk in truth. But can we get you something else? Like, we want to buy you a present." And so our kids can do absolutely anything that they want to do as long as they're walking in truth. And that is really unlimited. That they'd be honest with us and we're honest with them. Our children know our passwords. Like on my phone, if you give my child my phone, they'll access it, and they know what the code is. And so you walk in truth, and you just live in this transparency. Now, but you start that with obedience. You're teaching them to walk in truth, to be obedient. And as they prove that and live out this integrity, again, that's another heart word you're looking for: honor, respect, integrity. That's another one. Then you start back, and that's the goal. The goal is that you're not micromanaging your children when they're 15 years old. If you're doing that when they're 15 and hawking them and helicoptering them, there's something wrong. And so as you back off, now a lot of instruction has to come at this point. I'll give you an illustration of this. I have regretted somewhat teaching our children, or Lucia taught them actually, but teaching them to read. Because I remember when Hayden was learning to read, we were going down the road, and he could read the speed limit signs. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this one. And so he's looking at the speed limit sign and looking at the speedometer, and he said, Dad, speed limit says 45. And it's like, okay, we're going to do this for a year. Because I could not walk him through the spirit of the law because he was too young. And conscience issues, and there's just a whole cloud of things that we talk about as far as that idea of speed limits. And so but this is that support, and so it gets into this granular level, and it can be so tedious at times to just walk them through. And again, having these, when we had the talk is like a three-day time where Lucia took the girls, I took Hayden, and where we go away for 3 days, and we have this long conversation that's, it's not just conversation. I mean, Hayden and I went on a helicopter ride and stuff like that. So we do fun things as well. And we bought the girls purity rings, and Hayden, I bought him a throwing star. Literally. We went to the flea market and I got him a throwing star, which, it's kind of like a purity ring, When the girl comes at him, it's like, purity star. Yeah, we got him a purity star. And so there's a lot, and that's when we have this language, theology of language and how to use language. So again, and then now they're young adults, and that's how we treat them. Now, there are some abuses of this model, and let me show you just a few. I'll do a picture in a picture. Here's one, and it looks like this. Authority, 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 authority. From 0 to 20 or 0 to whatever. Now, what happens in this model here is that this kid is like, and then when that kid leaves the home, that kid's like, it's like shot out of a cannon. And they end up in a bar somewhere with an attitude. Now, this is how a lot of Christianity happens in the South. It's called legalism. Touch not, taste not, handle not. And so they keep these kids secluded and isolated and social distance and sheltered in place and all this new language we're learning this year. And homeschooled. And again, if you don't introduce your children to the world is going to come a-knocking, and you can't stop it. And so when our kids were 8 and 9 years old, we watched Cops. And we walked them through, this is drugs, and you respect the police officers, and whenever we see police officers, we generally talk to them and thank them for their service. We was in a restaurant in Bozeman yesterday, and there were 4 highway patrolmen over at the just sitting there. And I just went over and I said, thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for serving. We do that with military as well. Respecting authority. Thanking God for authority. But we have kids that are reared like this, and they just shoot out of this with their middle finger, and they end up in a bar. And then another abuse of this is this model here, where it's like very little authority. And this child is he fly high, he can fly high, wide, and far. And he will end up in the bar with the former legalist. This is the parent that, and there's no support, by the way. This is the parent that, a lot of these parents, they were raised by legalistic parents. And so they don't want to do that to their children, so they give their children a wide berth. And this is the parent that you see in Walmart with the kid that's yanking stuff off the rack. And the mama going, one, and the one gets really long. Because everybody knows it means nothing, especially the kid. Two, and mama just praying, please. Because if I say three, I ain't going to do nothing. You know I'm not going to do anything. And this is just like, please stop. And there's no obedience whatsoever. Another version of this can look like this. What happened right there where it changed so dramatically? Anybody got an idea? Yeah. Yeah. This kid turned 12 or whatever, and then dad and mom like, what we got here? And then they bring the hammer down because they don't know what to do with it. And so now this kid had been flying like this, and now all of a sudden he's like, Well, he's in the bar with the other two when he gets out of the house. The bar's filling up, by the way.
They still are.
Yeah, kind of want to go myself. I mean, they're probably more fun. I'm just kidding. Yeah, they're not fun. And then there's another model that kind of looks like this. And this is, what's going on here? Huh? Inconsistency. And what happens here a lot of times is like, you know, dad is like, he's not parenting, and then the kids are annoying, and then dad's like, you know, "Rrr!" And then they kind of behave, and then they get out of hand again. Dad's back on ESPN, and then, "Rrr!" And then they calm down for a week or two, and it just goes like that. Guess where this guy's going to end up? Yep. He's in the bar. And then there's one more that's kind of like this one here. What's happened here? The inverted. Yeah, they could give up. Could be the fundamentalist parents that got saved. And it's like, ooh, that was a mistake. And then it's like, hey, you know, Nintendo or whatever the games are. What are the cool games? What are the cool games? Huh? Yeah. Y'all need a translator? Fortnite, Xbox. Hey, what else you want? We made a mistake. Well, he's got some buddies waiting for him. All right, so any questions about this model? I'm going to move on to the next one. This is a more biblical model, the nurture and admonition of the Lord. You always want to be backing off because you want to release them as men and women under God's authority living in His world. Questions? All right. Now, I'm sure all of y'all do this right model, right? All right, so another way to think about this, there are 3 stages in a child's life. And those 3 stages are dependent, interdependent, and independent. And there are some theoretical time frames here. And so the dependent stage is like 0 to 2. That's the dependent stage, the diaper stage, where they really can't do much of anything. And they're really, really dependent on you. As they're growing, they get into this long stage here, which goes up to the independent stage. This window here is anywhere from 2 to 20. Again, those numbers you can flex. And the important thing to remember in the interdependent stage is that there are gradations here. And it kind of follows the idea of the other chart, is that they're going from dependence to independence, and so this is a fluid stage where you're releasing them and releasing them and releasing them. Now the hope is that in this window here that they become Christians, that God imposes himself on their lives and regenerates them, and they become born a second time. That's the hope. Because if they are in the independent stage is when they live on their own, they're paying their bills, driving their cars, paying their insurance, feeding themselves, buying their food, etc. They're completely out of the home, whether they're married or not. And of course, there's 2 stages here of independence: being single, and then the other stage of independence is if they get married. If they get married, they set up their own autonomous domestic empire. And so sometimes they'll be single and independent, and other times they will get married and set up their autonomous domestic empire, where they start this process with their own children if God gives them children. Now in this stage here, there is this line here around, we'll just say 12. But again, it depends on the child, because every child is different. Girls tend to be a little more mature than boys as they move through this. But then every boy and girl is not the same. And so they all have different personalities and they have different capacities. And so when you rear children, you train children up in the way that they should go. And one of the ways that we think about that is like a wagon wheel. And the children start in the same place here, but the way that they go, like with our children, is 3 different places. And so it's like the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. They are equal, but yet they are different. And children are that way as well. And I've seen where some parents parent the children the same, which is a mistake, because children are not the same. And so when a child says, well, that's unfair, you treated him differently, well, maybe you should treat him differently because he is different. And so there is wisdom in treating your children differently. You love them all the same, but you treat them differently because they're going in different directions. My oldest daughter was, reading before she was born and journaling. Or they do diaries. Men do journals, girls do diaries. But she was doing that. Hayden was walking upright at birth. he came out of the womb walking upright. And our biggest parenting goal was to get Hayden to where he is now, and he'd be alive. He is constant motion, and into everything. He's never been a bad kid. He's never. None of our children are ever been bad children. They're wonderful children. We are the lucky ones that we get to be their parents. But, and that's not grandstanding at all. Actually, we are the lucky ones. They are amazing kids. But Hayden, like one time, we were walking into a store, and I turned around, and he was laying prostrate on the ground, on the asphalt, lapping the water out of a dip that had that blue tint in it, you know, where oil kind of... And it's like, son, he was thirsty. We didn't have giving children drink as part of our parenting model. They're on their own. And then another time, he shot out of the car and ran toward the store, Sports Authority at the time, tripped, and the first thing to hit the ground was right here, and it hit the corner of the, what do you call that thing? Curb. Full force, knocked his teeth back, his front teeth. I'm sitting in Sports Authority holding him, thinking, this is permanent ruin, and which is not. He's okay. That's my son. We may or may not have prayed that he would get sick, because my daughters I could hold and cuddle, which is every dad's dream and mom's dream. Hayden, he could sit in your lap. If you count down to 10, you would never get to 1, and he's gone. But when he got sick, when he got a fever, glory. You could just hold him and cuddle with him. To expect him to go the way of Tristan or to go the way of Anza, it's not realistic. He goes this way. He marches to his own drummer. And so does Anza, and so does Tristan. There are 3 different directions. Hayden is working toward going to the Air Force. That's not Anza's dream. Anza actually is interested in culinary science. Tristan is interested in social media marketing and those types of things. But as you begin to discern the personalities of children, you begin to see little things. I guess I'm kind of picking on Hayden today. But I remember my mother, his grandmother. We come from a long line of dumpster divers, and dumpster divers are people that go in dumpsters and get stuff out of. And my mother was an amazing dumpster diver, and she would just bring stuff to the house, and we would sneeze for 4 days because of the dust and stuff that's on this junk that she got out of these dumpsters. But she brought a box one time that had these little doors on it, all over it, and it had locks all over it. Hayden had that box for years. She still have it. He was fascinated with those locks and those drawers. And you watch him, it's like, now, Tristan and Anza weren't interested in that thing, and that's what you're looking for. Because that was a clue. That was a clue as to the kind of kid this kid, this is the kid that when you go to your workbench, you're going to find your drill like in 4,700 parts. That's that kid. And then again, the others are different. And so it's important. I'll give you, and so in 1 Thessalonians 5:14, it gives you 3 different kinds of people. Now, he's talking about how to come alongside these 3 kinds of people. He says, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, and to help the weak. And so that's another talking point as to what he's saying there. But he said if a person is idle, you admonish them, you rebuke them. If a person is faint-hearted, you encourage them. If a person is weak, has physical problems, you help them. But what I want you to see is that the word faint-hearted literally means small soul. It means small soul. And so you have a person with a small soul, has a certain capacity. Maybe you can think of it like, this is too simplified, but just to give you an illustration, you could think of it like IQ. Different capacities. And in counseling, it's very important. One of the questions that a counselor is asking, am I counseling Forrest Gump or am I counseling Steve Jobs? It's two different people. They have different capacities. And so children have different capacities. And you have to understand those capacities, because what you could do, you could exasperate your child by expecting them to do more than they can actually do, because that's not how they are wired. And so we kind of get insight to that in 1 Thessalonians 5:14, where a faint-hearted person, you encourage that person because they have a small soul. And so in this interdependent stage, parents need to be smart. They need to be wise as they're bringing up each unique child through this stage. Now, as they, somewhere in here, where they cross the line, and again, this is just a preference for us. You can have teenagers if you want them. That's great. We love teenagers. But at some point, they do cross the line. And they are young adults. And throughout history, they've always been young adults. It's only recently that they have become teenagers. And so you treat, regardless of what you call them, you want to treat them as young adults and begin this ongoing releasing process. Okay? All right, so any questions about this? Y'all got it down?
Do you think, I was reading, it's just a fiction novel one time, but I think it's by Jeanette O, called Roses for Mama, and as the mom dies and as the older daughter brings up the younger kid, she says, well, when you take on this responsibility, then you get this freedom, so that they understand that freedom comes with responsibility also. And then the next time when they want to do this, well, then that's the time when, you have to do the iron or whatever, that's you take on this responsibility, then you get this freedom. So do you feel like that too, that they need to have more responsibilities as they have the freedoms that come to them?
Yeah, that's another way of saying what I was saying earlier, and thanks for clarifying, because that is the key. As when I was talking about you can do anything you want to do and be anything you want to do, it is comparable to being responsible. We'll use that word. Being mature. And so as you show your maturity, you get more responsibility. And if you don't, then we can't give. In fact, it would be irresponsible of the parents to give the child responsibility that the child has not proven themselves to be responsible toward. And again, it's important for the parents, to be able to walk those children through this stage here of giving them more and more opportunity. And by the way, what you want to do, and it's tied to what we were talking about last night, beyond your strength. Part of what you want to do is to give them things that they can't do well so they can fail. And so you want them to fail in the best sense of that language, because what you know, what I know, what every adult in this room knows, life is hard and it's not win-win all the time. In fact, and for those of you who have studied what we call great people, you know that their lives was just one series of failures after another until they succeeded, like Henry Ford, for example. And Henry Ford's philosophy was, failure is great because now I can check that off the list. That won't work. And so I'm narrowing it down. And so the possibility of succeeding is stronger and stronger because this failure is now off the table. And so you want you want your children to fail within your supervision so that you can walk them through it. And so we're not talking about throwing stuff in front of them so they can face plant and break something. But you want to continue to explore. The way that we do that in our training program, when I train our students, I tell them when they turn in a case study, a fictional narrative where a scenario and they have to answer the questions, I tell them that they will never, ever, ever, never turn in a case study that is correct. We will not let you. And so no matter what you say on that case study, it will not be perfect. Now the reason for that is because it's like, this is the way I explain it to them. If you come to the gym and you bench 5 pounds, praise God, we're going to add 5 pounds to it. And then you come back next week and you bench 10 pounds, we're going to add 5 pounds to it. And so every case study you turn in, we're going to find things that are wrong with it for the glory of God. They're not nitpicked to death, and they don't feel criticized at all. Actually, they're very appreciative because we keep adding 5 pounds. And when you get through this program, you're going to be benching 500 pounds. If you turn in a case study and we said that, well, that's a perfect case study, there's nothing we can say, well, we're not mentoring. We're not supervising. We're not teaching. And so with children, you want to always push them in the good sense of that. And by the way, Jagger is going, you're talking about military. They're going to kick your buttocks beyond your ability. And of course, the outcome of boot camp is a very similar concept because they want, and that's the way you want to parent, not boot campish, but that's the way you want to parent in a good way. So yes, a lot of that's tied to responsibility. And some of that responsibility, it's okay to fail because that is a very clear picture of what life is like outside of the home.
And do you think then with the freedom that they grow into, that not only responsibility as in acting responsible, but taking on responsibilities in the home and so forth?
Yeah. Well, two parts to that. One, make sure in all this this behavior stuff that we're talking about right now, responsibility and doing and so forth. Remember this, never forget this. And so we're talking about, behaviors and, being responsible and doing and, whatever we want to put out here, that's above the ground. But below the ground are these heart attitudes, that you built in, you've been building in before they were 2 years old. Integrity, humility, honoring, respect. You're teaching these because, as Jesus said in 6:45 of Luke, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so there's no discontinuity between who I am on the inside and what I do on the outside. And so what I do on the outside reflects who I am on the inside. And so if you don't have this kind of heart, then all this is a person, that's a legalist. That's what Jesus talked about in Matthew 23. You're whitewashed tombs. You look good on the outside, but inside is full of dead men's bones. And so you want to make sure that this is more important, but this is the part that comes early in the child's life. And as this grows inside the heart of the child, then these behaviors will be fueled by the right motivations. And so, yes, this is important, but this is more important. This is 1A, this is 1B. And so that's critical. What was your question again? Because there was 2 parts to it.
Well, okay, for instance, chores.
Oh, chores.
Responsibility in
Yeah.
the home and
Yeah.
not just like, hey, I'm a free ride and you
No,
do
right.
everything.
No, right. Yeah, and that's the second part I wanted to mention is that nobody's called to marriage you're called to singleness. Everybody else gets married. And so everybody gets married. But there's a unique call to be single. And so, statistically speaking, everybody's going to get married. Unless there's this unique person that God calls to be single. But that's an anomaly. And it does happen. I know some folks that are like that. But everybody else is going to get married. And so with that in mind, it's important that, again, go back to the autonomous domestic empire. And so the leave and cleave in Genesis 2, 24 and 25, that and this gets back to the adult thing, the young adult in the home. We know, unless there is a unique call on them to be single, we know that they're going to get married and they're going to set up their autonomous domestic empire. And so the question would be then, when do we want to teach them to take out the trash and to mow a lawn and to iron clothes and cook food and what I see with so many teenagers is they don't know how to do a lot of that stuff. When we had two girls live with us when our children were smaller. We lived in a very small home, and we were going to live there all of our lives. We loved it. It's very tiny. I mean, our entire house is like big as this room. That's pretty close, right? I mean, it's about as big as this room. This is our house. There was a big living room, and then there was a room on each corner, room, and then the big living room. That was our house. We were going to live there forever. Well, I mean, God did some stuff, and we moved, and because we were working with the church and so forth. And so we ended up with a bigger house. And we didn't like it because we're a very close family. And we like being together and like on top of each other because we love being with each other. And now we're in this big house, and we can't be on top of each other, and so it's just no fun. And it had an upstairs, too, which was terrible because we're just like all right here. And so we had two people come live with us, two 20-year-old ladies, because we needed to fill up the house because it's just two. And it became evident that these 25-year-old girls, I don't know they've ever taken trash out. And a whole lot, it's like, so this one girl, she stands in front of the mirror for like months. No, not like that. I mean, every day. And hairspraying herself. Not even thinking that she's caking the door with hairspray. And it's like, we're going to replace the door or chisel the hairspray. You've been like spraying this door for a month. Clueless. And then they like take the trash and then they just keep stomping it down in the kitchen. It's like, there's this like green barrel out back. You can pull this plastic out, tie a little knot in top, drop it in that, and like push it out on Monday, and these people come in these big trucks, and they're like, take all that away, and you can fill it up again. They're like, wow. I wonder what we're going to have. We about can't smash this anymore. And it was a lot of that. And I've seen so much of that with young people that they don't know how to have a autonomous domestic empire. And then when they leave and cleave and they have one, it's just a disaster. And that's why it's important, Carla, that you teach them those responsibilities within the home because they're probably not called to singleness. And so the chances of them getting married at some point in the future is pretty doggone high. And so you want to set them up to where they can, really do well, with some very basic things.
Yeah, like, I know I met a couple that in his family, the mom handled the finances, and in her family, the dad handled the finances. So when they got married, neither one of them thought that it was their job to handle the finances. So it was just one of those things that just
Right.
they hadn't been taught because the other sex did it in their family.
Right. Yep.
But like that, you get, put two people together who've never been made to do the dishes.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the teenage years, that they grow in those responsibilities and learn how to do that. And, you know, it's kind of like this. The saying is, you can hate me now and love me later, or love me now and hate me later. And for the parents that don't want to parent, the children, you know, may love them because they don't have to do squat, but they'll hate them later. Like, why didn't you? And then the parents that, you know, help these kids, it's like, you'll love me later. But that's hard on parents because they want the kids to love them right now and later. All right, one more. All right. Huh?
Okay, if you want to talk.
Why?
That was a twitch.
Huh?
That was just a twitch.
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time.
We just feel like, you know, we get more from it.
What's that?
We don't mind going into overtime.
Oh, I think these teenagers do. Kaya. Kaya. You're a princess. You want me to? Oh, she wants me to stop too. Y'all want to stop? Huh? Yeah, there is.
Well, do it. Let's do it.
I'm, s- I'm sorry. Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Okay, would you forgive me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I promise you that will not happen again. No, I'm serious.
I hope so.
Oh, I am. No, I am. I won't do that again. I'm sorry. All right, do you want me to continue?
I'd love you to continue.
You serious? Okay, all right. No, that's good. Now, Kaya, right?
Yeah.
We're tighter now, right? I don't think relationships can really deepen unless you have a good fight. Isn't that true? I mean, I wouldn't recommend, like, in this context, but it's like, but I stepped in it, so it's my fault, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for forgiving me. Because I don't want to be offensive, I really don't. That's very important that we do all that's dependent upon you to be at peace with all people. All right, we'll do one more. All right, so boys and girls, they're different. There are two genders, and they are different. All right, so the goal with boys and girls, they come into the world here, and the goal is for them to be whole in Christ. Now, in Colossians 1:28, I think it says that to be complete in Him. And so all kids come into the world like Pac-Man. They are incomplete. And the goal is for the parents to come alongside these kids and to... Now, the only way that you can find completeness is to be whole or to be complete in God. And so the parent's job is to lead them to God to where they can be complete. Now, the coupler here at this point is the father. whether that's the child's biological father, whether that's an adopted father, but a man who represents the father in this child's life. Now, the reason that this is important is because of God the Father. Kids have very narrow way of thinking about things. They have limited categories. Therefore, it's called mutual exclusivity. And therefore, when you teach a child something, I'll give you an illustration of this in just a moment, but when you teach a child something, that something represents the entire demographic. For example, my oldest daughter loved Blue's Clues when she was a kid. Do y'all know what Blue's Clues is? Yeah. You know what Blue's Clues is? All right. And so Blue's Clues is the TV show where the dog finds 3 paw prints. And then after he finds the third one, he finds the clue, and the story's over. The paw print is blue. We live in South Carolina, about 45 minutes from Clemson University. The Clemson Tigers, they have a paw print. The paw print is orange. Tristan's 2 years old. We get out of the car at a Mexican restaurant, and she is yelling in 2-year-old way, "Daddy, a clue, a clue." And I'm like, because she's really into Blue's Clues. And she has her handy-dandy notebook and some other paraphernalia. And so I asked her, I said, "Well, what do you mean? Where is there a clue?" And she points to the back of this car that had an orange paw print on it. A clue, a clue. Now, I am thinking that that's an orange paw print. It's Clemson Tigers, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Blue's Clues. But in a kid's world, that's how they think. And so this paw print, Blue's Clues, it doesn't matter if it's orange, if it's pink, if it's whatever. A paw print is Blue's Clues. It's one size fits all. And that's how kids think. Because they don't have these categories, they don't have the ability to think in nuance and contour. And so when a kid hears about a father, then they know what a father is. And then when you teach the child about God the Father, they already know who God the Father is because they have experience with one. And what you will find is that when kids have an imperfect representation of a father, and by the way, all representations are imperfect, but some are worse than others. And those who have worse ones than others, when they learn about God the Father, they already have an idea of what He is like and who He is like. And they bring that understanding into their relationship with God. And you will find a lot of 25-year-olds and 35-year-olds and 45-year-olds who have to unlearn who God the Father is because of this powerful shaping influence. Because think about from the time of 0 to say 12 years of age, those are the most powerful shaping influences in a child's life, in a person's life. And so there is just this big imprint of what a father is. And so you need not explain what a father is, again, because they already know. And so when God regenerated me at 25, I knew who God the Father was. He was an authoritarian. You better do right or the hammer's coming down. And so one of the reasons that it was so natural for me to go into the independent Baptist fundamentalist movement is because it's legalistic, it's rule-oriented, and I like rules. And I understood God as a rule-type person because my father was very much a mean person who he didn't keep us in line, but he was an abusive person. And so my interpretation of God wasn't like my father identically, but I knew I needed to stay in line. And so legalism worked for me, and I'll put that in air quotes because obviously it doesn't. But I did well in legalism because I knew I could toe the line. Just tell me what to do, tell me what the rules are, and I will do it. And I know God will be pleased with me because I keep all the rules. And so it's a weird relationship. And of course, it didn't work. That's another story. And so when a child is born, there's a time in the child's life and where the mom is really important. And maybe that's not the best way to say that. Moms are always important. But where mom is really kind of like more there than not, more on the scene. Obviously, breastfeeding, for example, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting, especially early on. And I'm not saying that dads get a pass. They don't. They shouldn't. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a time when it transitions to where the father needs to step up, because it's like the child going from a child to adult. It's the father who is connecting the child to God the Father, and he needs to be there. Again, whether it's biological father, I'm talking about a man that's leading this child and teaching this child about authority, and also communicating some very specific things to the child. Now, I want to tease this out. When, again, boys and girls are different. And so when God created Adam, there were two things about Adam that make up who he is. And those two things about Adam that make up who he is in every guy in the world. One of those things is that Adam is a man, and the other one is his work. God made Adam a man, and he gave him a job to do. And you know that when two guys get together, one of the top 3 questions that's asked like every time is, what do you do? What do you do? It's the way guys are wired. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, everything is right about that. It's our identity. God made Adam a man, and he gave him something to do. Now, where we men abuse this is that we become workaholics and we neglect our families and et cetera, and we do this poorly. But the answer is not to remove this, but to understand what this means biblically. And so a man's identity is who he is as a man and what he does. Therefore, one of the most important messages that a young boy can hear from his father is, you are a man, and encouraged in what you do, and want to grow him in being a man and grow him in what he does. One of the worst things that you could ever say, like in my day, one of the worst things that you could ever say to a boy, in fact, it would be a fight on the playground, is you'd call him a name. I don't know what y'all would say today, but you have any idea what that name would be that you would call a boy? That's it. That's it. You'd call him a girl. A sissy. That's a fight. Because I'm a man. And the one person in the room that communicates that is the boy's dad. You're a man. And you encourage him in what he does. Motivate him. Move him. Make this important. Model that. You're a man. You work. A mom can't do that. And that's what I mean here. I'm not downgrading or degrading moms at all. I'm speaking very much to roles and the importance of roles. Only a man can do this to a man. A father can be mean and abusive, and this is how it happened in my experience. When I was a kid, my daddy was a flaming racist. He hated black people. My mother didn't really. And the boys didn't. We were called poor white trash, or po white trash. There's poor and then there's po. If you're po, you're missing an O and an R because you're just that po. The song by Queen, we just a po family. Anyway, that's just my rock days, but never mind. So the only people that would hang out with us was black people, because nobody liked them either. And so we always gravitated toward black people. And so we were in the kitchen one time. I was probably 10, and the conversation came up about black people, and I don't know why I said that. I mean, I said it because it was true. But I told my dad, I said, I may even marry a black woman. And the next thing I remember, I was up against the counter in the kitchen, stuck in the corner, and he said, "You are no son of mine." I'm 61, and that hurts. A boy wants his dad to love him, lead him, to be that model, to be that picture. And again, I'm not downgrading moms, but moms can't do that. That's the dad's job. And if the dad's not encouraging, abusive, distant, disinterested. A dad that's disinterested is sending a loud message to this boy that, you're not a man. I mean, you're not so much a man. I'm not even interested in you. Not interested in what you do, not interested in who you are. And he just shrinks as a man, that young boy, that young man. And what he does, he's not important. Not important by abusing him, not important by passivity. Passivity can be just as strong as the aggressiveness, because both of them communicate the same message. You're not valuable. You're not a man. And so there's a window here where this is hugely important. And it comes back to what I've been talking about all morning, that transitional window from boy to man, from kid to adult. Biologically, we know it. Their voice is changing, body's changing. They're changing physically, spiritually, psychologically. Whatever we call them what you want, teenager, whatever, but they're changing. And this is that awkward stage when they're stepping into adulthood, and it's like they need a man to lead them across this ravine. It's awkward, they're insecure. Girls are the same way. They have a different thing, and I'll get to it in just a moment. But it's just as vital. Any thoughts about this? Questions, comments? And so then God created Eve, and Eve is different. She's a girl. She's also in a different place. There is a hierarchy. I mean, ultimately, the man is not the head. Ultimately, God is. And so the man is submitted to God. Eve is submitted to the man. Now, there's both hierarchy and equality within this dynamic. Boys, male and female, are absolutely 100% equal. They're made in the image of God. Nobody's better than any other person. No man is better than any woman. No woman's better than any man. We're equal. And so in that sense, we are all equal under God. And so there is that, and it's very true. But two things can be true at the same time. You also have to have hierarchy in order to have structure and have a lack of chaos. And so we have hierarchy, we have government, we have citizens, we have police officers, etc. We have school teachers, we have students. There's hierarchy everywhere. We have pastor, we have congregation. You have hierarchy, but y'all are just as equal as John in this sense, but we also live in structure, in hierarchy. And so Eve was created differently. She was created for the man. And there are two things that are vital to Eve as a human being, and they are vital to every girl in the world. You could put them in question form. If Eve is going to submit to this man in this hierarchy, even though she's equal up here, but in this structure, if she's going to submit, there's two questions that she's asking Adam. Those two questions are, do you love me? And is it safe? And those are the two most important questions in any girl's life. Love and protection, safe. You think about it like this. If a girl is going to marry a guy, if I were a girl and I were going to marry a guy, you better believe these two questions would be important. Like, are you going to love me? And is this going to be safe? It's common sense. And this is in the heart of every girl. And there are three people in a girl's life that will answer that question. The first person that will answer that question is her daddy, the father, the man. Because she's wired that way. Do you love me? Is it safe? And then, of course, if she marries, she's asking the same question when she comes to God. Do you love me? Is it safe? God says, for God so loved the world. Yes, he loves you. And is it safe? Absolutely. Eternity, heaven. I provide ultimate safety and ultimate love. And so this is an incomplete picture, but the Father is modeling, imitating God the Father as he leads the child to God the Father, to where they, in the most absolute sense, have their questions answered and live under God's authority, being who they are, doing the way they are wired. Now, what will happen? Again, the same applies to the girl. Abusiveness, aggressiveness on that side, or disinterest in the girl. Passivity. I'm not interested in you. However that's communicated. Both of those, even though they're polar opposites, communicate the same message. I don't love you, and I'm not quite sure if it's safe being around you, Dad, because I'm just not sure where you stand. Now, when they transition here, where this really becomes super important, and this is where moms need to learn this too, that there's a bit of backing off here. And dad is really stepping in. And so the whole picture is dad and mom working together, but there's times and ways in which it is different because there are two genders, male and female, and they are different and they have different roles. If this doesn't happen the right way, what will happen is that this kid will come out here and they will look for these things through other means. Let me illustrate a few means. A guy, for example, they will look for those things, they will look for these things in their strengths. In their strengths. And so, whatever the guy's strength is, let's say that the guy is excellent at sports. This is just his natural, God-given strength. Then that becomes that's where he receives applause, appreciation. That's his identity. That's where he's getting his fix on, his God-given fix through his natural strength. It could be academics, intelligence. It could be personality. That person who people are just drawn to them. And it becomes an addiction to where they get their approval drive stroked because they have this deficit in their lives because this did not happen for them. And there are many other strengths. Oswald Chambers says that an unguarded strength is a double weakness. Sometimes our strengths can be our greatest weakness. Let me illustrate this. A mom came to me a long time ago and she said that my daughter is rebellious, a hellion. And as I was talking to her, I said, well, how old is your daughter? Well, she's 12 years old. Well, what do you mean she's rebellious? Well, she's actually rebellious in every sphere of her life but one. I said, there's a place where she's not rebellious. Where is she not rebellious? She said, at school. And then I said, well, tell me about your parenting model. How do y'all parent? And the mom said, well, I parent the daughter, and my dad parents the son. All right. And then she told me, she said, Susie, which is not her name, she said, Susie asked me, like when she was a little kid, she said, Mommy, how come Daddy likes Tommy and doesn't like me? And then she said one more thing. Well, I already told you. Where she's not rebellious. In school. You know what's going on? The teacher, huh? She brings home straight A's, and her teachers love her. Susie found out she had a strength in K-5 when she started getting little smiley faces and stars at the top of her papers, and her teachers were like, and she began to feel something that she had never felt before. She felt loved, and she felt safe, appreciated. So school became safe for her, where she could receive love. And then, of course, she brings home the straight A's, and everybody in the house gives her a standing O. Grandparents, parents, And nobody realizes that they are applauding straight up idolatry. They have helped foster this idol inside of Susie's heart, which is the idol of academics, education. And I told her mother, I said, well, here's something that you can count on. She'll never be rebellious at school. She'll go to high school. She'll go to college. She may become a professional student, because this is the one sphere in her life that she can control. It's her strength. But her strength, and by the way, if that strength ever goes away, her whole world would crumble. If she had an aneurysm or dementia or whatever, if that went away, her whole world would crumble, because her whole world is not built on God. It's built on her strength because of what she's longing for. Does that make sense? And what will happen is that this window does close. Boys and girls go out and find their strength. And unwittingly, parents do applaud the strength, and they don't realize the internal dynamic of what's going on in these kids' lives, that they are just looking for their godness outside of God. You can be a God because they weren't led this way. And so as this window closes, there's one more window that does open up here. And this window here is, it can be much younger than 16 to 18. What's inside of this window? And what this means, boy meets girl. Now think of how this looks. You have a boy and a girl with this built-in deficit because dad has not been on the job. And so these are empty love cups. And they meet each other. And notice what happens. He feels like a man. She likes him. And he's feeling good. She likes me. Well, he loves her. Lust. But in their world, it's love. And so now they have this reciprocal idolatrous relationship because they're looking for something in each other that they long for that was not given to them in the family dynamic. And so now he's feeling, I got the girl in high school, so I am somebody. And of course she feels loved and protected because I got this boy, and that's neither love nor safety because another word for teenage boys is hormones in tennis shoes. He's got one thing on his mind. She may or may not, but she will soon, because once he starts putting the pressure on in either subtle or overt ways, she has to factor, do I want to lose him, lose this, compromise in order to keep this? And in many times they compromise because there's something greater that they want. And I was from marriage counseling for 20-something years. One of the questions that I ask couples that are 40 years old or whenever they come to marriage counseling, did you have sex before marriage? And well over 90% of them say yes. There's an article on my website titled, Sex Before Marriage is a Trail of Tears. And what they don't realize at that point is that he is demonstrating his leadership ability, which is using you. And if they get married, she will see that leadership ability a zillion times.
Did you say that was a podcast?
It's an article and a podcast. Yeah, The podcast is embedded in the article. You could probably just type sex before marriage in the search box and it'll come up. Sex before marriage. And actually in that article I give a whole list of things that are associated with this thing here. And that's why it's a trail of tears. And you'll find the headwaters right here. And so what happens is that this person, gets to God eventually, but it's the long way around. I mean, that's my story. And in my experience, there are very few people that actually take the direct route to God. Most people get to God this way because of the failure in the home, specifically on the dads or the man in the home. A lot of weight. And I'm not intentionally singling out, but it's just this here, this picture, that you are a picture whether you want to be or not. Adopted dads that step in, bio dads, and for those that don't have dads, then this is where the men in the church become those imitators of God the Father. In Ephesians 5:1 it says, as beloved children, imitate God. And part of that imitation is imitating God the Father, which only a man can do. And go back to Blue's Clues. Because if you give them a message of what a father is like, they will take that message. They'll take it through their lives, and they will have to reconstruct who God the Father is when and should they get to Him, even if they take the long way around. That's terribly depressing, maybe, for some of you. But it's a message that we need to hear. And we dads. And again, we're not talking about perfection. And by the way, dads, your sin is one of the best gifts that you can give your children. What happened between Kaya and me, we did not talk about this before. I'm going to sin against you publicly so I can use this as an illustration. We didn't do that, did we? We didn't have that conversation. But we do sin against each other. And my children and my wife can testify, as I sinned against Kaya, I've sinned against her more than anybody in the world. And then my children come in a close second. But that doesn't have to be a negative if you can say these words, will you forgive me? Sin can be one of the more blessed gifts in the home, because this is what's going to happen when those kids become adults. Guess what? They're going to marry sinners. And those sinners that they marry are going to marry sinners. And if they don't have a way of working through sin, it's going to be combustion. And so the home becomes a dynamic where sin can happen. And that is only a negative if the people in that home will not say, will you forgive me for? But when you say that, and now you have a redemptive home where sin is real, and you're not ignoring it, you're not sweeping it under the rug, you're stating the obvious, we're all jerks, we all make mistakes. Will you forgive me? Yes, I forgive you. Then you have a redemptive home. And so you're not, look, a perfect father will never happen. But what you want is one who is trying. Not to be perfect. Trying to do right. Trying to walk with God. A father who cleans up his messes. Will you forgive me? A father who cleans up his messes is the best kind of father that you can have, who's imitating God, and then when he doesn't imitate God well, he says, will you forgive me? He cleans up that mess. It is obliterated, and now he's back to imitating God again. And that's as good as it can get. Kind of got preachy there at the end. Didn't mean to. All right, questions? Comments? Thoughts? Are y'all already doing this stuff? Okay, I saw one face. I'm not going to look the person in the eye. The person went like this. Not looking in the eye. Yes, ma'am.
So, this lady that had a disabled daughter, she had come into our Bible study and she made a comment.
This lady that what?
She had a disabled daughter,
Uh-huh.
and then she has an older kid, but so much attention went to
Oh,
the mom
yes.
instead of
Yes.
the other kid. But she said they were farmers also, and so if the boys didn't work hard, like it was kind of a. But she said, love your kids for who they are and not what they do,
Yes.
and that has stuck
That's huge.
so far.
Yeah. And that's the heart. Yeah. And understanding that kids are different. Actually, yeah, now that gets into Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians 5:14. This help the weak. The disabled daughter is the weak. And so there is a requirement, and in many homes, I mean, that can be all consuming. That's where parents have to, and it's hard for the other kids. I mean, we've had that dynamic many times, like in counseling, marriage counseling, and parent counseling, that where the other kids really struggle, but the parent that understands what you just said and can really communicate that and really inculcate that into these kids, and they begin to see, kids need to, I mean, they already see the differences in each other, but they need to understand that that's actually God's beauty, that all 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of you aren't the same, and now we're going to parent you differently, but love you equally, and that's excellent what you're saying. And sometimes in situations what you're describing, it's even more pronounced because of the disability, and that does happen. That's hard, or it can be really hard. There's a lot of grace and wisdom with the woman that you're describing. All right, so if you want to, on another topic, just text and let us know. We can do something a little lighter tonight if you want, or we can keep drilling, and let's go have fun for the rest of the afternoon. If anybody want to meet and talk afterwards, or any time over the next couple of days, just let us know. All right, thank you.